Hola, ¿qué tal? Este es un nuevo programa de Resumen Latinoamericano que, como todas las semanas, emitimos desde Argentina para todo el mundo. Nos pueden encontrar en nuestra página web resumenlatinoamericano.org, donde también está nuestro programa de radio que hacemos semanalmente. Y antes de ir al tema que nos aboca hoy, queremos ratificar nuestra solidaridad con el pueblo palestino, que está en este momento llevando adelante un momento histórico en el sentido de se puso de pie la resistencia con todo lo que esto implica y también, obviamente, la contraofensiva por parte de Israel está causando nuevamente víctimas inocentes en Gaza y en Cisjordania. Pero lo importante es que Palestina está dispuesta a pelear por su libertad, por su independencia, y lo está demostrando. Y hoy vamos a hablar de Cuba, porque tenemos la primera parte de un documental, lo daremos en 2 semanas, que se llama Los Espías de Castro, y que tiene que ver con esa gesta que protagonizaron los 5 héroes cubanos. Me refiero a Gerardo, a Ramón, a René, a Antonio y a Fernando. Ellos son, para este documental, los protagonistas de toda una lucha de los servicios de inteligencia cubanos para tratar de desenmascarar y frenar los ataques terroristas que Cuba siempre sufrió en su contra. Y en el documental de Irlanda, dos cineastas irlandeses, Aslin y Gary Lennon, ellos le dan voz a los protagonistas que van contando cómo se fue armando esta saga de espías para tratar de desenmascarar en el seno del monstruo, precisamente en Estados Unidos y en el medio de la gusanera, desenmascarar y tratar de que no se produzcan atentados como venían sucediendo. Y queda claro que estos 5 héroes lograron parar el terrorismo anticubano y finalmente, después de la lucha que dio el pueblo cubano, más todos los esfuerzos de Fidel Castro y del gobierno revolucionario, volvieron victoriosos a Cuba. Vamos a ver la primera parte de este documental que, como les dije, se llama Los Espías de Castro.
¿Es usted agente de la seguridad cubana?
No.
You have to lie in order to do that job, and you have to be somebody you are not.
¿Es usted comunista?
No.
Fernando, pasas a ser oficial de casa.
I believe that for every Cuban that is present with such a mission, it would be an honor to accomplish it.
To do whatever is necessary for the revolution. That was my answer, not my response.
I knew for sure any action that they asked me to do, I would do it.
You have to use fake identities to work inside the United States.
Well, that's part of the training. In order to be successful, it has to be done quietly and in silence. It's not an easy task, I can say.
It's a disturbing case to know that we and our institutions are being spied upon, are being reported upon, and the information being transmitted back to the Director of Intelligence over in Cuba. We're not going to stand for it.
This spy ring was tasked by the Cuban government to strike at the very heart of our national security system and our very democratic process.
These charges against these individuals allege actions for the Republic of Cuba against the government of the United States.
We knew that we were technically breaking that law, but it is the history.
It's not a game to protect Cuba. That's our main mission.
Cuban history began when Columbus discovered the island on his first voyage to the New World. The Spaniards built the Morro Castle to defend the city of Havana from the pirates who pillaged the islands of the West Indies.
The tropical island of Cuba is only 90 miles from the United States, so near that the affairs of the two countries have always been closely related.
Even though we have a Cuban government here since 1902, all the way to 1959, the people who really took the shot here were the American government.
Nothing happened in the political life in Cuba and in the economic life in Cuba that was not heavily influenced by the government and the interest of the United States.
Everything belonged to the American businesses. The rice company, the electric company, everything. The sugar company.
Cuba's beautiful beaches and pleasant climate are among the attractions that bring tourists from other lands, many of them from the United States.
At night, the city takes on a new complexion. Amid a blaze of lights, the cabarets come to life. Any excuse is reason enough for a celebration.
You ask yourself, oh, so why was a revolution needed then?
Havana was like Las Vegas. It had a lot of casinos, nightclubs, prostitution, and it was all controlled by the American mafia.
Vacationers that came down from the U.S. weren't looking for a suntan. They were looking for a high time. It was attracting a different type of people that wanted prostitution, people that wanted gambling. Corruption was great. U.S. ownership was vast.
A small group of Cubans were profiting for this special relationship with the United States. People that had huge amounts of money. I cannot tell you firsthand because I was born in 1963, but my parents were working class individuals. According to what my parents explained to me, it was a very unequal distribution of income and wealth of the country.
This was really, really poor, you know, really, really poor.
My father was a farmer, and my mother was a farmer too. They don't have money, they don't have nothing to eat.
Well, my father was born in 1930s. From what he tells me, working back then was a privilege.
This gulf between the rich and the poor is the stuff revolutions are made of.
After 1953, when Fidel attacked the Moncada garrison, there was that feeling, according to what my parents explained to me. There was that feeling in the population that something of importance had happened. It was something that sparked the interest of the population, because we have to understand also that there was a feeling of deception in politics and in politicians.
I would say that most Cubans thought that there was no straightening out Cuba.
It was Fidel Castro's revolution that said, wait a minute, stop there.
This revolution of Castro's was the first in Cuban history to base its policies and its power on the peasant. They flocked to his support.
Fidel, he called the people to fight, and everything changed. And all of a sudden, that skeptical people who didn't care about politics became politicized through the revolution.
Joyous followers of Fidel Castro sweep triumphantly through the Cuban capital hours after their rebellion had toppled the regime of Fulgencio Batista.
Those who stayed were the ones who supported Cuban national sovereignty and who were the lower classes who were not the beneficiaries of the society that was controlled by the United States of America previously.
When the revolution came to power, it affected the interests of those with close ties to the United States system.
Shortly after the Cuban Revolution, many people, especially the upper and middle class of Cuba, left the country. They lost everything they had, their homes, their property, their possessions, and a large percentage of them came to Miami.
They moved with the mentality that the revolution would not last very long. Many people said the Americans are not going to allow this revolution to happen.
The U.S. decided to apply to Cuba the same formula that they had applied to Guatemala or different countries in Latin America. They would support counter-revolution through all means, terrorism, armed invasion, and weaken the revolution to topple it down.
I got involved with the CIA as a member of a group of students in Cuba. My father was in the sugar industry, was an executive for an American company. The middle classes didn't believe that communism was the best for Cuba. The government of Cuba stole from the people of Cuba their own success.
Jose Basulto, he thought that his mission in life was to oust Castro and change the regime.
I would have fought a war against them 1, 2, 3 times if necessary, had that produced the results we were looking for.
He was a fighter, let's put it that way, against Castro and against the revolution.
We were invited to come to the U.S. with the CIA to receive training. We were trained on multiple things, like intelligence, propaganda, psychological warfare, guns, explosives.
Brigade 2506 was trained to come to Cuba in what later was known as the Bay of Pigs invasion.
They were trying to, destroy the revolution.
A small force of invaders landed at a semi-isolated resort area on the south coast of Cuba on a strip of beach called Playa Girón at the Bay of Pigs.
At that moment, they were thinking that the revolution don't have support from the population. That was a mistake.
They were defeated so fast.
They didn't last more than 72 hours.
Our plan failed. We simply lost.
Fidel was able to say, the Americans are trying to overthrow us, we've stopped them, and so it actually helped solidify the support for the revolution.
The Bay of Pigs invasion was a tragic experience, both for the anti-Castro Cubans and the United States.
The majority of those who left Cuba after the revolution were peaceful. There was a small percentage who had lost their businesses, their homes, and their influence in Cuba that turned violently against the revolution.
This is Al Dempsey in Miami, just 5 minutes away from Miami Beach's lush multi-million-dollar hotels. Men are training to fight Fidel Castro's armies in Cuba. These men are bankers, lawyers, former professional men. There are even a couple of bakers in the group.
You have militant exiles who formed groups, militias, and became an offensive weapon trying to overthrow the government in Havana by violent means.
They were involved in a crusade against the Cuban government.
I was born on June the 9th, 1963. The life in Cuba at that time was at the very beginning of the revolution, you know.
I grew up in the 60s. There are hundreds of attacks. There were bombs that were placed in different areas throughout the whole island.
I remember clearly when I was a kid that one day the city of Havana was shaken by somebody who had come to shoot at a hotel. A hotel who was next to the shore right here in Miramar, with a boat and a cannon.
Yes, I shot the cannon. I only fired 15 rounds, and my co-gunner, if you may, the one that brought me the bullets, he said, I have to fire one. He shot one. I had the FBI behind me for at least a solid year. They didn't do anything to me. I wasn't even brought for interrogation.
The government of the United States, they don't do nothing if you are committing terrorism against another countries.
We were a country under siege.
What we call today IEDs, the improvised explosive devices, that's exactly what they were doing. They were planting explosive devices or bombs in order to create chaos.
There are thousands of victims in Cuba of those attacks.
We understand, even being a child, that the revolution is under aggression, you know?
We always knew that there were groups like that, and there were people in Miami thinking of ways to harm us. That is one of the reasons why individuals like us were needed in Miami.
In this war against communists, a lot of innocents have been sacrificed, and we know some more has to be if we want to make the victory, the final victory.
A Cuban passenger jet en route from Barbados to Havana crashed into the sea following an onboard explosion. 73 persons, 57 of them Cuban, were killed. Cuban exile leader Orlando Bosch and several other persons have been arrested in Venezuela in connection with that crash.
At that time, 1976, that was the first time an airplane was hit by a terrorist group.
When you see the people that were in that plane, young people, it was a horrendous crime. I was 11 years old. In the Revolution Square, we were paying homage to pieces, little pieces that could be recovered from the people in the plane.
The whole Cuban people was there, more than 1 million Cubans.
It had an impact on me as an adolescent. I mean, I was 13 years old, and I was in the Revolution Square with my father, my mother, and my sisters.
Everybody in Cuba was crying. Everybody was crying because that was a terrible crime.
No podemos decir que el dolor se comparte. El dolor se multiplica. Millones de cubanos lloramos hoy junto a los seres queridos de las víctimas del abominable crimen. Y cuando un pueblo enérgico y viril llora, la injusticia tiembla. Intimidar al pueblo es imposible. Frente a la cobardía y la monstruosidad de crímenes semejantes, el pueblo se enardece y cada hombre y mujer se convierte en un soldado fervoroso y heroico dispuesto a morir.
I don't think the Cuban people has never been after revenge. We only want justice. A couple of years later, there is this TV show reflecting on the life of somebody who was infiltrated in the United States. A Cuban infiltrating the CIA. The title of the TV show, In Silence, had to be done. Because in order to be successful, it has to be done quietly and in silence. Remember, back in those days, that was the most watched TV show in Cuba. Every Cuban identified with the character. And it's a character that is based on true facts. It gave us a sense of, well, there is a way to face these actions against Cuba, those who attacked us. And that made me think about that possibility. It was something that influenced me. That is something that I would like to do. That is something that I wish I had the opportunity to do. Of course, I didn't ask for the opportunity because that's not the way it works. It's just the opportunity came to me. I graduated from college in 1987. I studied international relations, and then I went to Africa. I was 24 when I went to Angola.
I was 20 years old when I went to Angola. I went there to defend the right cause, which was the independence of Angola.
I graduated. I volunteered to go to Angola. I was there as a lieutenant of a Scouts platoon.
I was stricken by the poverty, the misery that colonialism imposes on people. Not too different from what was happening in Cuba before the revolution. But at the same time, I could see the appreciation and the love that those people developed for the Cubans, because we went there and treated them as human beings. And it was beautiful. I learned a lot there.
It was really a powerful experience. The experience in Angola really made me stronger as a human being, as a man.
Cuban intelligence started observing me there.
I returned back to Cuba. Somebody approached me, and I didn't even know what it was for.
One day somebody come to you and tell you, we need to have a meeting with you.
Somebody went to my house and left a message. We need you to present in some place, some government place, the next day. So I went there. I didn't know what it was about.
When I came back to Cuba and I was about to start working as a diplomat, they approached me and presented a mission. My mission was to direct in the field a group of special agents that had been located in Florida. And they said, you know, we have people coming from Florida to do sabotage here and some acts of terrorism, and we need somebody to go there and infiltrate those people and send the information here.
I saw enough of the crimes committed against Cuba during the years so as to be aware of the need to defend it.
He asked me if I was willing to be part of that.
He was very insistent, telling me that I thought it over.
I believe that for every Cuban that is present with such a mission, it would be an honor to accomplish. And I said yes.
I told him right away, if you believe that you need my services, I'm ready.
I said, it's my duty.
I knew for sure any action that they asked me to do, I would do it.
To do whatever is necessary for the revolution. That was my answer, not my response. And then I started working with the secret services.
After that, then you go to a period of training. Basically, we have to take classes of work-related issues like cryptography, psychology. You have to deal with many people. You have to deal with yourself too.
Using different identities, another kind of personalities.
We took all kind of martial arts.
Things that prepare to be a secret agent.
This was a military operation from day one.
We were running this operation without a single weapon.
The training, in my case, it took a couple of years.
Of course, we got to do it without people knowing.
It takes separation from your family.
Separation was very hard. I met Adriana in 1986. She was starting to be a chemical technician.
Sabía que me gustaba mucho el mar, estábamos frente al mar. Me señaló, mira qué barco más bonito, hacia un lado, y cuando yo miré hacia el otro, él me dio un beso y hasta el día de hoy. Ahí fue donde empezamos nuestra relación de noviazgo.
We married in 1988.
Me and Olguita, we were very happy. A very happy couple.
Y bueno, René estaba muy lindo, la verdad, te lo puedo decir.
We had a daughter which we adored.
Porque bueno, fue una felicidad para nosotros tener nuestra hija.
It was a very beautiful period.
We discussed having children, but first I was finishing my studies, and then she was finishing her studies. Then Angola came, and then we decided to keep waiting.
I met Elizabeth in 1988. I met her in one bus stop. She was very beautiful that day. And asked her if she wants to have an ice cream with me. We got married in a very, big ceremonial in Malecon. That was in 1990. But what happened at the same time, I was working for the Secret Services. She didn't know nothing about me. She didn't know that I was working for the Secret Service.
I never told anybody in my family what I was doing.
For me, it was very tough. I was working supposedly for the Foreign Affairs office. Every day when you wake up in the morning, your wife asks you, where are you going? What are you going to do today? At what time you coming back? And you have to say, well, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know when I come back. I don't know at what time I can come back because that's the way it is. If you say anything, you jeopardize your mission.
I would consider them brave men. I mean, it takes some balls to do what they did.
You are able to do something that you understand and believe is good. You have to sacrifice something for that, you know?
You have to lie in order to do that job. And you have to be somebody you are not. And it takes a toll on you. It's not easy. You have to detach from your previous lives, from your previous ideas, so that people will see an involution of your thought. Little by little, you start speaking differently. You are not as politicized as you would be before. You are more critical of things. I'm a very outspoken guy. So becoming something different and living through life for me is not easy. It's tough. So you little by little you have to be changing in front of the people. I have been already graduated from aviation school. I was a flying instructor and I was flying a lot. I was told to steal a plane. They thought, with reason, that it would give me on my arrival some credibility and some propaganda which would be good for the mission. It was a little bit traumatic that day. That day was another day, just another day like days before. I've been trying to take a plane to the US for some months. So I had to do several attempts. I had to go back to my house, and it was really stressing because then you would go back and you would feel, on one hand, you would feel relief that you're going to see your daughter and your wife again, but on the other hand, you feel that you have to fulfill the mission and you can't. It's complicated. I left on December 8, 1990. I said goodbye to my wife, and I remember exactly how I left her standing in the middle of a walkway, her dress with flowers. I looked at her and I thought, well, I don't know whether I'm gonna see her again or not. And I met my daughter. She fell asleep. I took her and put her into the bed, and then I look at her. I remember her dress, a yellow dress, and I left her there and stood for a moment watching her until I just checked my head and left. But it's some things that you cannot forget. And then when I went to the airport, I found the right moment to steal the plane, and I left. It was really hard. The warning signs of fuel started to tell me, you're running out of fuel. It was very, very tense at that moment. And it was incredible. After 5 minutes, when I was about to return, I saw the Key West, the naval station in front of my plane. So I landed there with the little fuel I had left, and that was it. There came one little truck which said with a sign, "Follow me." I was processed on the base. They agreed that they would put me in a motel in Key West, and I spent my night in the motel there thinking of my family, of Cuba, on everybody. It was really hard, to tell you the truth. Remember that at one point I took off my identity card from Cuba, where I had the pictures of my wife and my daughter. And I looked at them, and I started to cry. I was thinking of what would be happening in Cuba. At the end, I fell asleep because I was so tired that I couldn't remain waking, but it was very rough for me.
El 8 de diciembre de 1990 me sorprendió la noticia de que René se había ido del país.
Then the next day, I sent a letter to Olguita, full of BS, telling her what I had left Cuba because it was better in the United States, that at last I was free in a democratic society, where I could become a pilot, a well-paid pilot, and do whatever I wanted, that someday we would be together, Irmita herself and myself, to be happy again, all kinds of stupid stuff.
Y yo, sin entender nada, yo decía que no era posible, que ese no era René, que ese no era el René que yo había conocido, que ese no era René.
Supposedly I was a very happy deserter. I waited for a reply.
Tanto, con el dolor de mi alma, me senté, escribí una carta diciéndole todo lo que yo sentía.
And went to my room to read the letter. So I opened up and started reading the letter. And it killed me. She said me all kinds of things, that I wasn't a good father, that I could keep the United States for me.
Y ya yo no tenía nada que ver con René, que bueno que René se fue y que de verdad era un traidor, ¿no?
She basically broke with me, and I was in shock when I read that. When you read it, it hurts. You look at it now, and it's a very logical response. But even though I knew it was logical, I mean, I cried a lot when I read that letter.
A eso lo siguieron días muy difíciles para mí.
It was a lonely time. But on the other side, you know it's your duty to do it. To do my job as a Cuban agent.
Miami, one of the world's hottest cities, welcomes you. In Miami, the world is your oyster. So welcome to South Florida and have a safe and pleasant stay.
I would be listening to Miami radio stations. They would do a radio program from the Havana in a restaurant. And they had invited Capitan Eduardo Ferrer, who was the head of the CUPA, Cuban American Pilots Association. All of them fascist, right-wingers, counter-revolutionaries, most full of hatred against Cuba. I located the restaurant. And I went to the restaurant and I presented myself. Listen, I'm the pilot who stole a plane. So they put me in touch with Capitan Ferrer. I went to see him to his house. He gave me the welcome, red carpet. The guy who stole a plane from Cuba. So what do you want to do? How can I help you? So I tell him, I want to be a pilot here. And that's how I came in contact with those people.
Pasé muchísimo trabajo, como lo pasó todo el pueblo, pero en este caso yo solita. Como no tenía la ayuda de mi esposo, yo era una gente joven, y realmente yo trataba todo el tiempo de proteger a Irmita. Primero le dije que su papá se fue a estudiar. Y bueno, ¿y por qué no me lo dijo? ¿Por qué no se despidió de mí? Niños, al fin, ella jugaba mucho con el primo más contemporáneo, que es mi sobrino. Y Irmita vino llorando. ¿Y qué te pasa? ¿Qué te pasó con Michelle? Dice, ya yo no quiero más a mi primo. Bueno, ¿por qué? Dice, porque mi primo dice que mi papá es un gusano. Entonces, en mi familia, mentar a René era mentar al hombre que me había abandonado con una niña y se había llevado un avión y se había convertido en un contrarrevolucionario.
Little by little, they will be infiltrating those groups in order to get information about the plans of these organizations and sending the information to Cuba.
You have to use fake identities to work inside the United States.
You are going to live the life of somebody else.
You have to become a person that you are not.
To know by heart a biography of somebody else.
They used for the most part, dead individuals using their passports, had scoured sort of the obituaries. It's about my age. Let's falsify his identification papers, just like what you see in the TV.
And you have to know everything about the person. The day he was born,
who his parents were,
the schools he was attending,
the name of the teachers, the name of your classmates.
And then you have to start living that life. It's not an easy task, I can say.
In my case, I was Manuel Viramontes, which was a Puerto Rican. I was Puerto Rican, so I have to learn Puerto Rico, everything.
I was using the name Luis Medina. I was a Puerto Rican, and I know all the biography of Luis Medina.
Well, my legend was, I was Ruben Campa, an individual that had been born in the United States of Mexican origins. I was carrying identification papers that were not mine. False identity.
You have Social Security card, you had a driver license.
The first time that you go in the U.S. with a fake ID is hard.
The first time is terrible.
They asked me for my passport, but Puerto Ricans, you could travel just with your driver license and your birth certificate. So I didn't have a passport. And they started interrogating me, why you don't have a passport. They gave me a hard time. It was a kind of a scary moment.
You need to believe it just to act that way. It's very complicated, and it's something that you have to be every day on top of it.
Remember that I passed through immigration with no problem at all.
Once you cross that line, you said, I'm here. Once you are in the U.S., you have to start building his history.
You need to build your life.
I realized that it's good to have pictures because you need to have some history of life. Because pictures give you history. How can I show people that I'm Luis Medina, a citizen of the United States, for real, with pictures? I am Luis Medina the whole time I'm inside the United States. He's exactly like me, but different than me. You can see the pictures. You have to portray Puerto Rican, and the way they dress up, you know, the Puerto Rican use big chains. And I received this one from another officer. This helped me a lot in my job. It helped me a lot because it helped me to be Luis Medina and to fulfill many missions in my job. And I feel like it's a lucky charm.
The Cubans were very good at their trade craft. I mean, they were very good at spying.
There is a group of people that are infiltrated in the groups. And my task, my goal, my mission was to handle those individuals.
Cuban spies were trying to get into anti-Castro organizations here in South Florida. Who was doing what? Reporting back to their government.
But in my case, once I started dealing with those groups, I was given a lot of liberty to make assessments and to decide who to approach, who not to approach.
I didn't know them as spies. I knew them as participants in Brothers to the Rescue.
I was together with the president of Cuba, Capitan Eduardo Ferrer. He was consulting me on how to launch a unmanned airplane to Cuba with explosives. We were talking about the feasibility of doing it. And all of a sudden, Basulto called on the phone. And Basulto told this guy that they were creating Brothers to the Rescue the next day on Miami Airport. And the guy told him, oh, you know who's with me here? He's René González, the guy who stole a plane from Cuba. And Basulto, of course, he was excited at the prospect of meeting me. So he told him, oh, invite him there. I want to meet him, whatever. The next day I went to Miami Airport. I had already met a couple of guys in Miami, and they greeted me. And one of them introduced me to Basulto.
René González. He told me how he got there before everybody else. I don't know. Well, these people from Cuba, I'm telling you, they're good.
Brothers to the Rescue in the early 1990s was formed as a result of the influx of Cuban rafters into the United States. The Coast Guard couldn't find them all. People were dying, people were drowning.
We were going to start flying airplanes to locate the refugees at sea.
Since the beginning, I was involved in most operations of Brothers to the Rescue.
They had a bunch of Cessna airplanes. They had volunteer pilots, volunteer spotters. They would radio the location of the rafters to the Coast Guard, who at the time would pick them up and bring them into the United States safely.
At that point in time, they weren't being repatriated to Cuba, they were being brought to the United States.
If they were picked up on the sea or they made it onto land in the United States, they were given permanent resident status immediately.
Miami. The number of Cuban rafters is on the rise. Nearly 2 dozen picked up yesterday. That's why Brothers to the Rescue is stepping up search flights for rafters.
I realized that doing sometimes good things have more impact than doing bad things.
Right away, he started to receive funds. People in Miami gave their money, and all of a sudden, he became a personality in Miami.
To refugees, they are heroes in the sky, the Cuban exile group Brothers to the Rescue.
When he was doing just that in the Florida Strait, international waters, rescuing the rafters, Cuba just kept watching.
It was an intelligence gathering. That's all René really did. He was good at it, too.
You have to set a way to communicate with them.
It was the beeper time. One of them would send me a beeper with a code saying, I need to talk to you. You have to get out of your house. Look for a safe public phone. First, you don't go straight to the payphone. You have to do a score counter-surveillance plan for me to be sure that when I get that phone, nobody will follow me. So I call a beeper from the public phone and put a number.
They would beep you and you would go to a place.
I go to that place and he goes to that place. It's something that is prearranged.
I gave him a whole report of the 6 months since I have been in the United States. About Brothers to the Rescue, what they were doing, my involvement with Basuto, with Cuba, of course the plot of the airplane full of explosives. And from there on, we started to communicate regularly.
And then I have to go right back and send an urgent communication to Cuba. We had a system to transmit information, short messages to Cuba through phone lines.
You pass on the information and you're not responsible with what is done with the information. You just pass it on to Cuba.
Truly, it was a very sophisticated operation that was being run not just to provide protection, as they would assert. They were trying to get into U.S. Army facilities.
Ramón, for a time, lived in Tampa, Florida, near MacDill Air Force Base. And he had, we called it the box of war. Time Life magazine company sold these little, they're like recipe cards, but they had pictures of the planes on them. This is what an F-16 looks like. This is what an A-10 looks like. Basically little flashcards for children that are publicly available. He watched planes take off and identified the planes with the box of war.
Sitting around counting planes at MacDill Air Force Base up in Tampa, that's all they ever did. And down in Boca Chica, same thing.
Tony was working at the Naval Air Station in Key West, Florida. He was mainly employed at the Public Works Department on the base.
The labor shop, that's where I work.
He was a metal worker, no access to any secret information at all.
He didn't have any clearance. He just counted planes, something you could do from the road.
Planes can be seen from the public highway, which runs perpendicular to the military base.
If you get a car and drive by a US 1 close to the base, you can see how many planes there are there. You don't even need to work there.
You can go, it's a sign there, you can take a picture there and record it.
I'm convinced that one of the goals of this conspiracy was to exploit, to better understand how our military would work, our assets, our capabilities, trying to count planes, see what planes were at what Air Force bases.
The question is why Cuba needed them.
For us, it was very important to see what was happening in Boca Chica because Boca Chica is very close to Cuba. The naval base closer to Cuba.
When the U.S. invaded Panama, in that Key West station that used to be 12 planes, days before there were 60, 70. When the U.S. went to Haiti, the forces in that Key West station multiplied as well. So Cuba wanted to have an early eye checking. If one day, instead of 12 planes, there are 60, something's going on in the area.
We were afraid for an invasion coming from Boca Chica.
They would snoop around, what are you doing? Where are your buildings? What are you doing here? And they snooped around this one building that was going to be used to hold classified information.
They making a renovation of that building. The building 1125, that was the number, A1125.
Tony was working on that building as a laborer.
And I hear somebody say, oh, this building is something for top secret, So I put that in one of my reports. Oh, I work in the building that somebody said that.
The Cuban Directorate of Intelligence said, tell us more about that stuff.
And I never answered. I don't know what they said that.
And the law in the U.S. says very clearly that in order for you to be guilty of espionage, you have to have gathered or transmitted information that is closely held, that is secret.
And that thing was open. Even a guy come with a machine of Coca-Cola. It was not like, oh, this is closed, this is something, you know?
And that's not espionage, because it's not secret.
Who might have access, in fact, more access than the janitor, who comes in sort of unpretentious, without notice, and is able to move around freely inside a base where classified information is. All spies aren't James Bond. You need those others that are available and can get the job done.
We never tried to get any classified document, any top secret. I didn't know what does a top secret mean. Really, I didn't know.
It was illegal, it was in violation of our laws, but was it meant to harm our national security? No, I don't think so. Is Cuba even a threat to the United States? What are they going to do to us?
Cuba don't want any conflict. If somebody said that Cuba want a conflict with the United States, it's a crazy person. It's not, you know?
I think all the Cubans really were ever worried about was, you know, would they ever be invaded by the United States? It's all defensive, you know, it's not offensive.
Bueno, y esto es todo por hoy. Los esperamos la próxima semana con la segunda parte de Los Espías de Castro.
Banco Credicop, el banco cooperativo ideado para que los sueños de los argentinos se hagan realidad. Hay otra idea de banco y funciona. Súmate. Banco Credicop Cooperativo, la banca solidaria.
Sindicato de Visitadores Médicos, Asociación Agentes de Propaganda Médica de la República Argentina.
Asociación de Trabajadores del Estado, Central de Trabajadores Argentinos.